Today we're going to tackle the job of changing the engine coolant in the Captiva. So that needs to be replaced every 5 years. So the coolant that's in there at the moment is the red type. So this is the red type coolant manufactured by Penrite. It's got a life of 8 years on it. Alright, so I've got the vehicle out in the driveway because I know that this job, it'll make a bit of a mess. So the first thing we need to do is, we can go ahead and just drain all the old coolant. So there's a little plug on the bottom of the radiator. Okay, so that little, right there, that little plug there, that's what we need to undo. Alright, so this isn't as messy, so this little hole here underneath there, that's actually where the coolant will come out of. So I'm going to try putting a rubber hose like that just onto the end of there, just to see if that helps it and doesn't make such a mess. So I'll connect it up and then see how we go. So that method is actually working. I've only got it opened up a little bit, but you can see that that does work. But I've got the second pan just below it, just in case it does make a bit more of a mess. So I'm going to open it up a little bit more and see how I go. Alright, just in the engine bay there's a little bleed screw at the top of the radiator. So I need to undo that to let some air into the system. So if you remove that air pipe, you've got more room to get into here to access that screw. So there's about 10 litres of coolant. I think these pans hold about 8 litres, so I'll turn that off in a second and tip it into a bottle. Still getting a few drips because it's not going to be perfect, but at least it's not making as big as a mess as I thought it would. I've also taken off the filter cap here just to let the fluid or let air into the system. So we're just finishing off emptying it now. Alright, so I was able to manage to drain about 7 litres out of that. So of course there's going to be some coolant that remains in the block. That's why we need to flush out the system now. So what I've done, I've tightened up the drain tap on the bottom of the radiator. I've left the bleed screw open, that's at the top of the radiator, and I just want to put in this same amount of distilled water, so 6-7 litres of distilled water. So we just need to keep adding distilled water until we can see liquid coming out of the top of that bleed hole. So at the moment it's dry, so we just need to keep adding some more distilled water. Alright, so I've put about 6 litres of distilled water back in. You can see it's dripping out of the overflow, or the air hole up the top there. So I just need to put that bung back in. Then I'm going to put the air ducting back on, and then we need to start it up and run it and get it up to temperature. Alright, so just to check what I've done, I've tightened up the drain cock on the bottom of the radiator. I've tightened up the bleed screw at the top. I've also just put the air ducting back in, and the level in there is pretty much what it should normally be at. But I'm going to just leave the cap off until the engine's started, because there will be air pockets in there, and once the coolant gets pumped around, I'll put the cap back on and then get it up to temperature. It's also important to put the heaters on, so it's on maximum now. Keep the heater on because it needs to run that coolant through there. Alright, let me just put the cap back on, and you just need to keep an eye on the coolant temperature too. So what we need to do now is just, once that's up to temperature, It will need to sit and cool down for a bit, and then we're going to actually repeat the process again and drain all of that distilled water, because this process is actually flushing the coolant, because you can't drain it all out. As you saw, we only took out about 7 litres, but there's actually about 10 litres in there. So once the distilled water circulates, washes through, we drain all that again, and then we repeat the process if you need to. It just depends, because this is only a 5-year-old car. Anything older, if you're doing it at the 10-year mark, you may want to flush it a couple of times. So once that's up to temperature, I'll just leave it to cool down. So I ended up just taking it for a quick drive around the streets just to get the temperature up. That allows the thermostat to open. Then you know that the fluid, coolant, is circulating. So what I've got to do now is, while I'm waiting for it to cool down, I'm going to start mixing up this. So the way this is concentrated, so you mix it with 50% distilled water. So I'm going to get started on that now. So then that way I can get these ratios right. I do understand that there is a bit of coolant left in there still. And then what was remaining, about 3 litres, that's been now diluted down with distilled water. So you could do the maths if you wanted to get it spot on perfect. Alright, I've tried to do the maths on here to see if I've got this right. So the total amount of coolant in the system is 10 litres, or 10 litres altogether, which if it was mixed at 50-50, it would be 5 litres coolant, 5 litres of water. We then drained 7 litres of liquid out of the system. That would leave us with 3 litres remaining, 1.5 litres of water, 1.5 litres of coolant. We then added 7 litres of distilled water to flush the system, and then that would make the ratio then 8.5 litres of water to 1.5 litres of coolant. We then drained that again now, drained the 7 litres of all the distilled water we put in after we flushed it. Then the 3 litres that's remaining would then contain 2.7 litres of water and only half a litre of coolant. So that's what's remaining before we refill it. So in order to balance this ratio out, you would just add 2 litres of coolant, and then therefore you would have 2.5 litres of coolant, 2.5 litres of water. And then we can start adding these bottles, which I've mixed up these ones of a ratio of 50-50. So it needs 2 litres in there straight, concentrated, then we'll add these bottles. Alright, just about finished draining the flushing for the second time now. Just a few drips to go. So what we're going to do first is fill up with the concentrated first, 2 litres of concentrate, and then I'm going to use the 50-50 mixers. So I just need to let that finish trickling, do up the stopcock at the bottom. I've undone all this again, and then the little plug air bleed up valve is open, so I'll start filling up again. We're at the stage now where I've added enough coolant for it to start running out of this bleeder valve, so I have put that little bung back in there now. So just while I'm waiting for the coolant level to settle still, I'll just start putting all this air pipe back on, because that can go on now. Okay, so we're all done now. I'll keep that open and then start up the engine just to let any pressure come out, and then put the cap back on. And that's it. So here's all the waste. Just a reminder, if you can dispose of that in a environmentally safe manner. And I'll just give you a bit of an overview of the tools I used for this job. So just some scales to weigh out the water and coolant to get the ratios right. That rubber hose, this is a heater hose. It's a 1/2-inch hose, so that one was the one that I fitted to the bottom of the radiator. And then just some tools here, a couple of screwdrivers and some vice grips to remove the air hose. And that's it, yes. Okay, so hopefully you found this video useful. So I still have a bit of coolant left over. because we only made up 10 litres, or sorry, we only made up 8 litres because of the concentrated 2 litres that went in. So hopefully I've got the maths right on that. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching my videos.